This resulted in 1 in every 30 Romanians acting as informants on their neighbors, colleagues, friends, and family. The atmosphere of security surveillance was stifling. Telephones were monitored. Correspondence was intercepted. Hotel rooms and private residences were equipped with listening devices. Romanians adapted by conducting sensitive discussions while running water taps to disrupt eavesdropping equipment. Typewriters were required to be registered with the authorities, enabling writing samples to be compared to anonymous correspondence. Ceaușescu's paranoia even extended to reproductive control, as he was intent on boosting Romania's population for national strength. In 1966, he prohibited abortion and contraception. Alarmingly, women were mandated to undergo gynecological examinations at their workplaces to identify pregnancies. Those who did not bear at least 5 children faced heightened taxes. This policy resulted in a surge of dangerous illegal abortions and overcrowded orphanages filled with unwanted children raised in appalling conditions, a humanitarian crisis that would only come to light after the regime's collapse. By the 1980s, fixated on settling Romania's foreign debt, Ceaușescu enforced austerity measures that inflicted unimaginable suffering on an already beleaguered populace. Food was rigorously rationed, 10 eggs per month, half a loaf of bread daily, and 100 grams of butter every 2 weeks. Meat vanished from the shelves. Electricity was restricted to only a few hours each day. Heating was limited even during the harsh winters of Romania. In stark contrast, the Ceaușescus resided in lavish luxury. Their primary home, Prima Palace, boasted gold fixtures in the bathrooms, crystal chandeliers, and silk carpets. Elena was said to hoard designer clothing and jewelry. The couple enjoyed meals made from specially cultivated organic produce while malnutrition was rampant throughout the nation. Their son Nicu gained infamy for his involvement in drunken driving incidents and sexual assaults, facing no repercussions for his behavior. Romanians developed a dark, fatalistic sense of humor, often expressed through jokes whispered in secrecy. However, beneath this facade of resignation, a growing anger was simmering. The catalyst for the revolution emerged from the western city of Timișoara, located near the Hungarian border. In December 1989, as communist regimes were crumbling across Eastern Europe, Pastor Laszlo, an ethnic Hungarian Reformed Church minister, publicly denounced the regime's oppression of minorities and the destruction of villages under Ceaușescu's systematization initiative, which aimed to dismantle traditional rural communities and relocate peasants into concrete apartment complexes. When authorities attempted to evict Tokes from his church residence on December 16, his parishioners assembled to defend him, forming a human chain around his home. What started as a modest demonstration to safeguard one individual rapidly escalated into widespread anti-government protests, with Romanians of various ethnic backgrounds uniting in solidarity. The government's response was immediate and violent. Ceaușescu, who was vacationing in Iran at the time, commanded a military crackdown even before returning to Romania. Security forces opened fire on unarmed civilians in Timișoara's Opera Square on December 17. Protesters, including children and the elderly, fell victim to machine gun fire. The precise number of fatalities remains a subject of contention, however, by December 20, numerous protesters had lost their lives. In a particularly gruesome turn of events that would further incite public anger, the Securite gathered the corpses and transported them to Bucharest for cremation, attempting to erase any evidence of the massacre. This violation of the deceased in a profoundly religious nation would become one of the regime's last heinous acts. Ceaușescu severely misjudged the circumstances, thinking that a display of force and some nationalist rhetoric would suffice to restore order. On December 21, he arranged a large rally in Bucharest's Palace Square, a familiar strategy he had employed numerous times to showcase his popular backing. Positioned on the balcony of the Central Committee building, surrounded by party loyalists, he commenced his speech, which was broadcast live on Romanian television. 8 minutes into his address, an unprecedented event occurred. As Ceaușescu condemned the fascist agitators in Timișoara, a disturbance broke out in the audience. The meticulously orchestrated cheers transformed into boos and whistles. Someone began chanting, Timișoara, showing solidarity with the slain protesters. Others joined in. For the first time in 24 years, Romanians openly rejected their leader. The expression on Ceaușescu's face at this moment encapsulates the entire narrative of a dictator suddenly realizing that his hold on power has weakened. His demeanor shifts from assurance to bewilderment to fear. Within seconds, he raises his hand in an attempt to pacify the crowd, while his wife, Elena, can be heard urging him to engage with them. The broadcast was suddenly interrupted, but the damage had already been inflicted. Live on Romanian television. The spell was shattered. By that evening, Bucharest had erupted into riots. Young protesters surged into University Square, erecting barricades and demanding an end to the regime. The pivotal moment occurred when Defense Minister Vasile Malea defied Ceaușescu's commands to open fire on civilians. Furious, Ceaușescu ordered Malea's execution for treason, falsely announcing over the radio that the minister had taken his own life. Following Malea's demise, the military shifted allegiance to the revolution. Army units began to engage with the protesters, with some soldiers removing the communist symbols from their uniforms. Tanks that were initially dispatched to suppress the demonstrations now served to protect the revolutionaries. The Securitate forces loyal to Ceaușescu found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. If you find this account of Ceaușescu's dramatic downfall intriguing, please take a moment to click the subscribe button. This will keep you informed about future episodes covering history's most astonishing power collapses and the fall of dictators. Thank you to everyone who does. Now, let us return to the unfolding events. On the morning of December 22, as revolutionaries stormed the Central Committee headquarters, the Ceaușescus fled in a state of panic. Television cameras captured the extraordinary scene of a helicopter taking off from the roof of the building that had been the epicenter of communist authority for decades. The dictator was literally fleeing for his life. Their escape plan quickly fell apart. The presidential residence at Snagov was already under revolutionary control. Their pilot, fearing anti-aircraft fire, reported mechanical issues and landed in a field approximately 50 miles northwest of Bucharest. In a bizarre twist of fate, the Ceaușescus found themselves hitchhiking along rural roads. They briefly separated, with Nicolae hiding in the woods while Elena approached a passing vehicle. A local agricultural engineer offered them a ride but soon recognized them. Instead of taking them to their intended destination, he drove directly to a nearby industrial facility where they were detained until military forces arrived. Subsequently, the Ceaușescus were transported to a military base in Târăvest and held for 3 days in an officer's quarters while fighting raged across Romania. The National Salvation Front, a rapidly established revolutionary government led by former communist official Ioanliu, now confronted a significant dilemma. What should be done with the ousted dictator? The situation remained unstable. Loyalists of the Securitate continued to engage in combat with army units and revolutionary forces in the streets of Bucharest and other cities. Civilians were targeted by snipers. The death toll was increasing by the hour. Concerns arose that security special forces might attempt to rescue the Ceaușescus and reinstate them to power. In this crisis-laden environment, the new leaders concluded that a prompt trial and execution would help stabilize the situation by effectively extinguishing any prospects of a counter-coup. As ICU would later articulate, the trial was essential to cease the street fighting. On Christmas Day 1989, within a classroom at the Targo Vista garrison, a military tribunal was quickly convened. The proceedings were recorded with a single camera to serve as evidence that justice had been served. The indictment was hastily constructed, accusing the Ceaușescus of genocide, a dubious legal charge considering the circumstances, undermining state authority, destroying the national economy, and illegally accumulating a billion-dollar fortune in foreign banks, a claim for which no evidence was ever presented. The defendants were given no time to prepare. Their defense attorney, Constantine Lucescu, was appointed mere minutes before the trial commenced and appeared to collaborate with the prosecution rather than advocate for his clients. The entire process contravened nearly every principle of due process recognized in Romanian or international law. Ceaușescu, still clad in the same winter coat he had worn while fleeing 3 days prior, refused to acknowledge the court's legitimacy, asserting, "I do not recognize this coup d'état. I am the President of Romania and accountable only to the Grand National Assembly." He consistently maintained that only Parliament had the authority to try him. This was a technically accurate assertion according to the Constitution, but it held little significance in the revolutionary context. Elena exhibited even greater defiance than her husband. At one moment, she yelled at the judges, "I raised you like a mother. You are not judges. You are merely actors in a performance." She chastised her husband for failing to equip the working class to defend socialism and declined to respond to inquiries regarding her involvement in governmental decisions. After less than an hour of tumultuous exchanges, both Ceaușescu were found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death by firing squad. There would be no opportunity for appeal. The execution was to be conducted immediately. This was a blatant breach of standard judicial procedure, yet one that the tribunal deemed necessary. As they were escorted away, the reality finally appeared to dawn on Nicolae. His final words to the court were, "We could have been executed without this charade. The true history will not be recorded in this manner." Immediately following the verdict, soldiers escorted the couple outside to a wall in the courtyard. The Ceaușescus requested to die together and asked that their hands remain unbound. Both requests were refused. They also requested that their personal belongings be sent to their children, unaware that their adult offspring were already in custody. The execution wall was hastily chosen, a side wall of the garrison bathroom, a degrading final setting for a man who had constructed one of the world's largest administrative buildings as a tribute to himself. The soldiers utilized a metal bed frame propped against the wall to prevent ricochets. Elena fought vigorously against the soldiers as they tied her hands with rope, exclaiming, "Do not bind us. Do not insult us in this manner." Her infamous temper, which had instilled fear in government officials for decades, remained unbroken, even in her final moments. The execution squad was composed of 3 volunteer paratroopers. Captain L. Boru, Sergeant Major Jorgen Octavian, and Doran Marian Sirin each carried standard-issue 7.62 mm AKM assault rifles equipped with 30-round magazines. The men would later express that they felt both the burden of history and personal resentment towards the couple they deemed responsible for Romania's plight. The couple was presented with blindfolds, as is customary in military executions, but they declined. In a bid for dignity in his final moments, Nicolae began to sing the International Communist Anthem in a trembling voice. Meanwhile, Elena oscillated between cursing the soldiers and calling out for her children. The command was given, and the paratroopers swiftly opened fire. However, instead of executing a controlled volley as planned, all 3 soldiers unleashed their magazines in a chaotic burst of gunfire, totaling 90 bullets. Subsequently, they would justify this excessive force as stemming from pent-up rage and fear that the Ceaușescus might somehow survive a more restrained execution. The camera operator, taken aback by the ferocity of the gunfire, only managed to capture the aftermath. Once the smoke dissipated, it was discovered that Nicolae had been struck by 13 bullets, while Elena had sustained 14 wounds. Additionally, Nicolae had been shot in the knee, an ironic fate for a man who had subjected numerous political prisoners to knee-breaking torture during Securitate interrogations. An army doctor examined the bodies and then proclaimed, "The conjugator is dead." The soldiers promptly wrapped the corpses in canvas. A voice can be heard on the video stating, "Now the curse is lifted from Romania." The entire execution, from the trial room to the final declaration of death, transpired in less than 10 minutes. The footage reveals a telling insight into how thoroughly the couple had instilled terror in Romania. Even after they were evidently deceased, the soldiers and officials appeared anxious, as if the Ceaușescus might somehow resurrect. This fear reveals much about the psychological effects of their 24-year rule. On December 27, Romanian television aired edited footage of the trial and execution. For a populace that had endured fear for decades, witnessing their formerly untouchable leader's death was both shocking and cathartic. Individuals congregated in homes and public squares to view the images. Many experienced a complex blend of relief, vindication, and discomfort regarding the rushed nature of the proceedings. The execution's timing on Christmas Day imbued the revolution with a nearly religious symbolism of rebirth for the predominantly Orthodox Christian nation. In the immediate aftermath, the country was enveloped in a carnival-like atmosphere of freedom. Romanians could suddenly express themselves openly without fear. Prohibited books surfaced in stores. Churches were filled with worshippers. Western products began to flow across the borders. The abortion ban was promptly lifted. Additionally, contraceptives became accessible for the first time in decades. Internationally, responses to the execution were varied. While few lamented the Ceaușescu themselves, many were troubled by the swift nature of the trial and execution. Even the Vatican condemned the absence of due process. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, who was overseeing the gradual dissolution of communist authority, labeled the execution a serious mistake. The bodies of the Ceaușescus were initially interred under the cover of darkness in Bucharest's Ghencea cemetery in unmarked graves under false identities, kept secret to avert either desecration or pilgrimage. It was not until 2010, following years of legal disputes initiated by their offspring, that DNA testing verified their identities, leading to their reburial under their true names. The hurried nature of these proceedings fueled conspiracy theories that continue to exist today. Some asserted that the executed couple were impostors or that the entire revolution had been orchestrated by foreign intelligence agencies or former communist officials seizing an opportunity to gain power. The fact that many former Communist Party members, including Ceaușescu himself, swiftly re-established themselves as the new democratic leadership lent some credibility to the theories of a managed revolution. These suspicions intensified when it became evident that much of the violence following December 22, which resulted in over 900 of the revolution's approximately 1,100 total casualties, occurred after the Ceaușescus were already in custody. Some historians suggest that elements of the Securitate were instigating enough chaos to justify a military coup, while others argue that the new leaders intentionally exaggerated the terrorist threat to strengthen their own authority. Even some members of the tribunal later voiced concerns about their involvement. One judge confessed in a 2009 interview, "We did not have time to contemplate the morality of our actions. We were in a state of war and acted accordingly. Yet, I still question whether we made the right decision." Meanwhile, the remnants of the Ceaușescu era continued to influence Romanian society. The children left behind in infamous orphanages. The families shattered by informants of the security apparatus. The cultural and architectural devastation caused by his systematization program and the enduring legacy of corruption that thrived during his regime. All these factors persist in shaping contemporary Romania. Ceaușescu's demise was swift, public, and unforgettable. The individual who constructed a palace with 1,100 rooms met his end against a grimy wall next to a restroom. The rushed trial compels us to face uncomfortable inquiries. Was due process compromised for the sake of revolutionary necessity? Or was this merely vengeance masquerading as justice? Nevertheless, the symbolic weight of those final images is undeniable. The dictator and his spouse reduced to pitiable figures in winter coats, protesting against a tribunal they could not intimidate. Thank you for watching Nefarious History. If you found this video engaging, please subscribe for more narratives about history's most tumultuous downfalls.